Two. Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. Most of my clients are in the real estate space. We're all about setting people free, and that's why this book that we're about to talk about is absolutely perfect for you. If you're out there and you're looking to potentially, you know, create more revenue, create more freedom. Matt Picheny has a book that we're going to be referencing quite a bit in this podcast. So it is an honor to have you, Matt Picheny, here with us today. You're full of personality, so let's have some fun with this.
Thanks, Mike. A pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Backstage Guide to Real Estate. Tell us a little bit about this book and who is it for?
Well, this book is for anybody who's interested in real estate, whether you've done real estate before or not. Like you mentioned, Mike, real estate is a great way to help set yourself up for financial freedom. And what the book does is it tells my story going from a guy who knew absolutely nothing about real estate. I actually used to be an actor making less than $8,000 a year, and how my journey to where I am now, which is, I've got over $638 million worth of real estate that I've syndicated. So it's a little over 4,500 units.
Wow, incredible, man. Do you know some people we've worked with? Tim Bratz, Mark Evans,
Sure.
DM.
I
You
know
probably know the
Tim.
Pace Morbys of the world, all of them, right?
I don't know how many of them that I know. I know a few of the guys that you've mentioned or know of them.
You know
Uh,
Vinny Chopra? I just had Vinny Chopra
I
on this
do know
podcast.
Vinny Smile Chopra.
Vinny Smile Chopra,
Yeah,
what
I
a
know
guy.
Vinny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a character. I figured you
Yeah.
guys would definitely hang out. You guys have positive personalities.
Thanks.
So wait, yeah. So and I love the subtitle, Produce Passive Income, write your own story. I say that probably 4 or 5 times per day, and direct your dollars towards positive change. Um, you said you started off as an actor. How did you go from an actor to a real estate syndicator?
Yeah. So I mean, and you see in the tagline that nod to the acting business, right? Produce, write, direct.
Oh,
Um,
you know what? I did not catch that. That's fascinating.
yeah, and so the arts are something that I'm really passionate about, and so that's something that my wife and I are very much involved in. That's her full-time job, and we actually have a couple of Tony Awards for producing some Broadway shows, which is really exciting. The way that I got into real estate is really I got kicked out of my apartment. That's how I got involved in real estate. I had my own company. I used to be a professional actor, like I said, making less than 8 grand a year, starving artist, loving every minute of it. And um, this was in the like mid to late 90s. I started getting involved in the internet in its infancy, right? And being able to develop as a hobby, I started figuring out how to build websites, like very basic with like HTML. Back in the days of like GeoCities, if you or any of your listeners were around back then, a long time ago, with the dial-up modem. But what happened was there was so much need for that work that people were coming to me asking me to do it. I ended up starting my own boutique agency. Things were going great. I was living in New York City, had a boutique agency in New York City doing web development. 2001 came along and the dot-com bubble burst. All of my clients went out of business. My business completely imploded. And at that time, I got a phone call from my landlord who told me I had 90 days to get out of the apartment that I was living in. So what was I going to do? You know, he had to sell the unit. I needed to find a new place to live. And Showtime, the cable television channel, had offered me a position to come in-house. They were a client of mine. And I was looking for a place to rent. And instead, I ended up finding a place to buy. It was way, way, way uptown in an area called Washington Heights, which wasn't necessarily where I wanted to live, but I was able to buy something. So that was very intriguing to me, made a lot of sense. And I bought the property. And a little over 2 years later, I sold the property and I saw my down payment, my initial investment in this in the property more than quadruple in value.
Wow.
And I mean, I was making 6 figures, which was really good money back then. And this one transaction was more than 1 year's worth of salary. So I was like, all right, how do I do that again? That was pretty good. I don't know how that happened, but I want to make that happen again. And I spent the next essentially 15 years trying to figure out how to do that again. I fixed and flipped properties. I did a house hack. I did a vacation rental. I think I mentioned I flipped some property. I did some single family turnkeys. And then I found out about this thing called syndication, which when I first found out about it, it really wasn't well known. Now there's like tons of podcasts talking about syndication. I didn't know it existed. It first came into my, realm of awareness. And I was like, wait a minute, this is kind of that missing link that I've been looking for. Because for me, finding deals was pretty good and being able to operate the deals was pretty good. I just didn't have millions of dollars. Like I had some money, but I didn't have, a substantial capital to really grow my business. And through a syndication, I was like, oh, I can find other people who actually have money. And I actually had friends who had said to me, hey, if you're ever going to, I know you do the real estate stuff. If you're going to flip a property or something and you need some money, let me know. But I didn't even know like how to do that. It didn't seem to make sense. The stuff I was flipping was definitely like small potatoes. So I didn't even really need their capital. And how would that all work out? And how would I do that? And so I found out about syndication, delved into that, and built up the portfolio that I have now.
Incredible. Yeah. My clients taught me about syndication. That's why I got into self-storage. So I'm not
Oh
in
wow.
multifamily, but self-storage. I started off in my entrepreneurial career as a landlord. I bought a 4-unit building after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm assuming you read that book. Is that right?
Of course, you
Game
can't.
changer for many of
You
us, right?
cannot, yeah, you cannot, I think, be in real estate and have not read that book.
So I read that book. I was 22, changed my life. I finally understood what an asset was, got a license in real estate, bought my first 4-unit building with an FHA loan. Are you familiar with those, right?
Oh,
3%
sure.
down.
House
What a
hack.
game, man. What a game. It's incredible. So
Nice.
I realized that I like investing in real estate. I don't like working on real estate. So that's why I give my money somewhere that makes me money, but I don't even want to look at this place. I don't even want toilets in there, right? There's a self-storage guy that I know. His hashtag is no toilets. That's all he cares about.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Well, Mike, what I do with my portfolio is so I have 4,500 units as a general partner, and those are ones that I am actively involved in and working with our property management company and all that. But I also have over 7,000 units that I've invested in passively.
Wow.
As a passive investor, and other people who have multifamily, and I've done some other things. I haven't done self-storage yet, but I've done some other assets. We also invest in Broadway shows too, which is a whole other story. But I agree with you. Sometimes having to deal with the operations of a business can be, whether it's dealing with tenants or whatever the challenges that you might have are. That's why I think passively investing can be really powerful, because you have somebody else who hopefully knows what they're doing. Hopefully you've done a good job vetting them, right? And that
Yep.
they know what they're doing, that they have experience, and that they can operate it well. But if they can, you can make a very nice profit without really doing any of the work.
Exactly. Yeah, I guess when you know yourself, you know where you belong. And I like working in the book business and in marketing world. I don't want to be in the real estate world in the operation side. I just like
Yeah.
having my money work for me, bring back more dollars, as Mr. Wonderful says from Shark Tank. So I want to touch on chapter 4 of your book, and the subject line is Matt's Folly. What is that?
Matt's Folly is so, as I mentioned, the book takes you from me knowing nothing and not being involved in real estate to where I am now. And it teaches 18 keystone concepts that I learned along the way. And Matt's Folly is a property that I bought in Connecticut. And I bought the property, and I think it was a good investment to buy that property. I then decided to build on that property. And I bought a vacant piece of land. It had trees on it. And let me back up and explain. So I had a really, really, really good friend whose father is a real estate broker, or was a real estate broker in Connecticut. They had a wonderful house, and we used to go up there once in a while on the weekends to just get out of New York. I mean, I live in New York City. I lived in Manhattan at the time, right? So concrete jungle, want to get out and, commune with some trees, breathe some fresh air. So we would go up there and hang out. And he reached out to me and he's like, Matt, I want to do a website for my real estate business. I know you build websites. Will you build one for me? I said, yeah, sure. He's like, okay, well, why don't you come up? Because I think we already had a trip planned to come up. And he's like, I want to show you around this area where we do a lot of business. So it's called Woodridge Lake. So I go there. He's like, because I want you to see the area so that like, I don't know, like maybe you should take pictures or whatever, like for the website. And I'm like, okay. So he shows me around this area and he shows me a bunch of these houses. So it's a beautiful area. There's a lake. It's like a lakefront community. There's like a marina and a clubhouse and like 8 tennis courts and an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Like it was a nice thing. I didn't know it existed because you have to be a member. You have to live there and have be a member of the Property Owners Association to have access to all this stuff. We used to just go visit him and he lived, I don't know, 20 minutes down the road. So I'm like blown away by this area, number one, because I didn't know it existed. Number two, because they were like really nice houses and like lakes and boats and like what's not to love. So he's showing me around some of the houses that they've sold, takes me in a couple houses that are actually under construction that he like sold and hooked up the and we're driving by an area and he's like, oh yeah, and that lot over there, we have that lot listed. And I was like, wait a minute, that lot? He's like, yeah. I'm like, so you could just like buy the land? He's like, oh yeah, like there's actually plans to build a house on the land that like you buy the lot and then you can build a house and like customize house. I'm like, oh, that sounds like interesting. Just curious, like how much does a piece of land cost? It was very inexpensive, especially compared to New York City prices. So I bought the property. And then years later, I decided to build the house on the property. The whole time that I'm doing this, ever since I bought the lot and I was thinking about building this house, I had this voice inside of my head saying that this was going to go down in like the history of my life as Matt's Folly. Like this is going to be like I'm going to spend, I don't know, you ever see that movie, The Money Pit with Tom Hanks?
That reminds me of my first house. Yeah, Tom Hanks.
I'm just thinking that's what I'm afraid of. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to spend like millions of dollars. I'm going to lose all my money. Like I had this voice of doubt in my head, literally saying Matt's Folly. And I decided to actually build the house. And like the whole time I'm building the house and the whole time I'm trying to rent it out, I just constantly had this voice in my head saying Matt's Folly. And so I talk about in the book, in that chapter, that story, I tell the whole story. There's actually pictures of it, of the house and everything and along the process, and how I pushed myself past that voice of doubt. And the way that I did that was by building a team. Okay, so I built a team of experts. I surrounded myself with experts that allowed me to take risk, but take calculated risk in a way that I knew that while there was risk involved, I wasn't getting in over my head. And that's how I was able to get into syndication and scale my business, by surrounding myself with experts, by having a community of people that I can go to have trusted advisors who've been in the business for a very long time. I am now a trusted advisor for a lot of people. I have my own coaching program where I teach people how to do multifamily syndication, right? Because now I have that experience and that track record. But at the time when I was first starting out, I didn't have that. Being able to have a mentor helps you, collapse timeframes and scale up. Building a house is one way of like collapsing a time frame and scaling up. Like I went ahead and learned all those things and learned literally from the ground up what real estate's made of. I mean, we dug a hole, like we poured a foundation, like the whole 9 yards. I picked out every single fixture, every hinge, every nail in that property. I didn't realize how many choices you have to make when you're building a house. Like the faucets can be 8-inch or 4-inch spread and like all the different I'm like, what's going on here? But it was an amazing learning experience. And then after the house was built, I met an amazing woman who, thank God, decided to marry me. And so we were dating by the time the house was done. Like just as the house was finished up, I met her. And so I actually never ended up spending very much time in the house because her folks had a place in on the other side of the state of Connecticut, and they were very seldomly there. So we used to go there. And so the place was a rental. And so it was like a short-term rental, like a vacation rental. And so I learned about renting, and I learned about dealing with tenants, and I learned about lease agreements, and I learned about the accounting stuff like depreciation and all these kinds of things that I never knew about. And so that house, Matt's Folly, which I ended up selling eventually and doing okay, and I didn't make $1 million off of it, but all the learnings from it were invaluable, because I wouldn't be where I am today if it hadn't been for that and pushing through that voice of doubt.
It's awesome. Yeah, the more I understand business, the more I understand how real estate is so tied to the banking industry. And I think that the reason why real estate is such a safe bet as compared to other startups is because, I mean, this world runs off the banking industry, and the banking industry basically runs off of real estate. So just understanding that principle helps you, maybe put away those fears. And so individuals out there, they probably don't even realize that debt is good to a certain extent, right? You want to borrow money so you can have that tax depreciation, right? You can have certain benefits associated with, but other people's money in general, whether it's syndication or banks, this is how you create wealth. And so I think the average person doesn't realize that. Probably ties back to the school system teaching them, hey, the way to wealth is to work a 9 to 5 for 65 years and then you'll be wealthy. When people come to you, is the hardest part showing them that everything they're taught in school is probably wrong, and breaking the patterns of generational curses, if you will, of work to make money rather than borrow or use other people's money to create wealth?
You know, I have a YouTube channel. The most popular video by far was based on an article I wrote for Forbes, which was incredibly popular on Forbes, and it's called "Why You Should Not Pay Off Your Mortgage." And so it goes into exactly what you're talking about, those different sort of principles of, that article talks about good debt and bad debt. There is bad debt, right?
Oh yeah.
Buying a
I'm
Lambo.
I hate bad debt. I'm gonna stay away from it completely, right? So I'm with you.
Yeah, so buying a Lambo on some kind of crazy car loan, bad debt, right? Liability, not an asset, but using debt to buy assets, right, is wonderful, as you know. I usually am not, when I'm talking with people, I'm usually not educating them on that. A lot of the people who reach out to me are either people who've already sort of taken I don't remember if it's the red pill or the blue pill for the
It's the
Matrix.
red pill. Oh, 100% the red pill. Yeah.
They've already taken the red pill and are like, hey, I want to do multifamily. Like, can you help me? Or there are people who haven't taken the red pill, but are aware of the red pill. And they've I still like having my job, my secure job as a doctor, lawyer, marketer, whatever, right? Like even you, right? Like you're different. You're definitely red pill, but people who have been they like their job, or they can tolerate their job and they make good money on their job, but they understand the benefits of real estate. They understand the benefits of leverage, right? And so they're like, I want to invest in real estate as part of my portfolio, as part of my investments. And so they come to me as passive investors. And so I have a large database of passive investors, people that I've met over the years, but I haven't necessarily had to educate them. A lot of them are already sort of educated, know the value of real estate, and are already kind of on board.
Sophisticated enough to hold a conversation, but just don't want to do the work. And because of your credibility in the marketplace with your books, your coaching programs, and YouTube channel, they look at you as the go-to guy that will cure their problem. Is that right?
And on my social media, yes, 100%.
Yeah. And so when you wrote this book, what happened? I love talking about the importance. If you're a coach out there, if you have a solution, if you're on the hero's journey and now you are in that third stage where it's time to go back and serve the many, I think it's so significant to write a book. What happened after you put that book out there?
Well, so I sold the book. I released the book. I sold 1.7 million copies in the first week. I am totally lying. No.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at the reviews. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, but holy shit, Matt, that's amazing.
1.7 million. No, I did not. Oh, I did have a very good first week, and as a matter of fact, I hit the bestseller. I was the number one bestseller on Amazon in real estate investing and like 17 other categories, which was wonderful. Um, but I have not. So first off, I spent a lot of time on this book. I don't think that people often spend the kind of time that I did on the book. It is a 250-page book. Like a lot of people's books aren't this big. I mean, it's a nice hardcover. I
Mine's
think,
mine's mine's 130 or somewhere in there, yeah. Or no, 160. So yeah.
yeah. So I mean, and I see people with like 100-page book. This is 250 pages. And it's I also spent a lot of time just doing like, making the interior look. I have an eye for design and aesthetics. So I did spend a lot of time on it and really wanted to make it good. I worked with a writing coach. I did not have a ghost writer, but I know that I'm not necessarily the best writer and I had never written a book before. So I knew somebody that I could go to. So I spent money on that, spent money on the editing and the graphics and all of that stuff. And I knew the whole way through, it was like, I'm never going to sell enough books to like make back the money that I spent. Now, again, I don't think people have to spend that kind of money to write a book and publish a book, but the book that I wanted to do, the way that I wanted to do it, I was like, you know what? I'm never going to make that money back. And I'm perfectly okay with that because I thought that I would get more than that back through having the book as an asset.
Bingo.
Yeah. So I have, since I've written the book, a lot of things have happened. I wouldn't say all of it is just because, oh, I wrote a book and that's it. I mean, I also worked my tush off. I used to work in marketing and digital marketing in New York for 18 years. So I kind of know a little bit about marketing and stuff. And I worked with a lot of people, a lot of podcasts and things. Like when my book launched, I was on like about 40 podcasts, like within a week of the like leading up to and then after the launch. And because of that, and because of my connections, and because of my business growing, and because of my social media, and definitely the book is a part of all of that, I'm able to be, I'm at a point now where I've been asked to speak on stages. I'm not getting paid yet for my speaking, which will happen soon, I think. But they're like flying me out and putting me up in a hotel room. So like I'm like, that's pretty good. And speaking on a stage, and I've worked hard on that, worked with a speech coach now who's helping me kind of tweak my presentations and stuff like that. But I think they're pretty good and pretty impactful. But the book is definitely part of it. People say, have you gotten any investors from the book? I say, I don't know. Because what happens is I'll meet with an investor and sometimes they're like, I read you, they find out about me from the book. Sometimes they don't, but they know I have a book. So they automatically sometimes gives me like some credibility. Sometimes they meet with me and then they buy my book. Sometimes I meet with them in person. I'm like, hey, here's a copy of my book, right? So very expensive business card. So, I think it's one of many like tools in the shed. I think it's a really good tool. It also, because of what I wanted to do and the way that I wanted to do it, it took me a long time to write the book, and it was very detailed. I think people who, what I do hear from people is that the quality is fantastic. It's funny. Someone I was just talking to this morning, he's like, yeah, I read your book. I felt like I was like talking to you, and I'm like, perfect, because that's exactly
Oh,
what
it
it's
should
supposed to
be.
be. It's
Yeah.
very conversational. And it is not like a textbook. It is like just like it's more of a memoir that teaches lessons along the way.
What
It's
we
got some
teach.
funny
Yep.
stories. It's got some embarrassing pictures of me in it. It's really fun thing. I think it was fun to make, but it took a long time.
Yeah, I think I would assume your personality shines through in it. And Dr.
Oh,
Joe Dispenza always says that your personality creates your personal reality. So you need to show that personality for people to fall in love with you as a person, for them to be attracted to you and your brand and your message. So very significant. I always say to people, if they're about to get into real estate, know your investor DNA. Now, this is my outline, and I'd like to hear what yours is, but find your investor DNA. Are you looking to do a multifamily? Are you looking to do self-storage? Where do you see yourself 5, 10 years from now? And then work backwards, right? Start to lay out the breadcrumbs that lead to that dream version of yourself. So it really does start with the end in mind. what do you say to people? What is the outline that you provide? And maybe it does tie into chapter 11, the real estate tricks for magicians in training. What's your game plan?
It actually ties into a different chapter. It ties into there's one called Charting Your Course to Financial Freedom. And so that's really where I talk about how I was like, all right, I want to do this, but how do I get to where I want to be? How do I get to that financial freedom? And it was about sort of starting where I was, figuring out where I wanted to be, and the gap on like how to get from point A to point B. Now, that's a little bit different though than what I consider investor DNA. So I consider that, that roadmap very important. It's actually the first thing when someone comes in to start coaching with me that we work on, right? But the DNA is really, it's also something that I talk about in the book, although I don't call it investor DNA, is making sure that your values are aligned with the types of projects that you're investing in. So I tell a story in the book about an opportunity that I had where I wanted to get involved in multifamily syndication. And I was going to start off as a passive investor. I was looking for my first deal. I knew I wanted to be active, but I'm like, hey, I'll invest in a deal passively. So I was looking for a deal, my first deal to invest in passively. And there was a guy, a very well-known guy, so I will not mention their name, who was well-known and that they make a lot of money for a lot of people. So I was like, okay, great. I met this person. This person seems nice. And the person tells me that they're doing a tour in this market where they operate, and that I could come to this market where they operate and take a look at some of their properties. I was like, great. What an awesome opportunity to go see like what they're doing, and also maybe learn a few things on like how to do something like this for investors if I ever wanted to do something in the future like this. I don't know, it's a good opportunity to go there and meet people. And so I went and we toured the properties, and they were in like really, really, really bad condition. And I asked some questions it was like a whole weekend thing, and along the weekend, and like that person, that sponsor couldn't answer the questions. Like it was always deferred to the property management company, where I was like, does this guy even kind of know like actually what's going on from an operations standpoint? And the stuff that the property management company told me, I didn't like their answers. I didn't agree with them, or, whatever. I didn't like the answers. But most importantly was that one, I can remember vividly, I have a picture in my head. I remember vividly this one property that we went into, and we looked at the property. We were going, I remember vividly going up the stairs and being scared because it was like a metal staircase, like a garden style apartment, right? We're going up to the second floor, and it was like kind of like, and the paint was like peeling on it. And we go into a unit, and the unit's like just trashed. I mean, it's bad unit, and it was an occupied. It wasn't a non. It was an occupied unit, and I was just like, man, this is horrible. Like the conditions were just like terrible. The whole property, and so I was like, all right, well, he does value add, right? So he's gonna make this property better, and they just bought the property, so he's gonna make it better. Excuse me, Mr. Sponsor, how long have you guys owned the complex for? This is our third year. And I was like, oh man. And they don't have any plans to fix it up. That guy was essentially a slumlord as far as I'm concerned, right? He was making money by keeping the level of services and the quality of the property down, cutting expenses as much as possible, keeping it occupied, maybe raising rents, I don't know. But all I knew, without even getting into the details, I didn't even look at the pro forma on the property, was like I didn't want to be involved in that. I took a hard look at myself, and I was like, okay, I can make a lot of money. Everyone tells me this guy makes a lot of money. I can make a lot of money. But I didn't feel comfortable with that. Like I didn't invest in it. Now I've done a lot of deals since. I've made a lot of money, but I have to make sure that whatever I do is aligned with my values. And what I was thinking about back then ties back into sort of earlier in the book, and my days as an actor, and my days getting kicked out of an apartment, and my days of making $8,000 a year, and who I was and the way that I felt that the world should be. And it did not line up with what this guy was doing. And it lines up with what I'm doing now. I mean, I try to make property ownership a positive for communities. Now, I don't run a charity, I run a business, and we make money. We make lots of money. But I think that you can do well by doing good. And I think that we can change that stereotype of an evil landlord, a slumlord, and make landlords heroes. And that's something I strive to do. We do lots of things. I could talk for another hour about all the things we do at our properties to improve lives for the community that lives there, right? And build a stronger, foster and nurture a community there by giving away things, by doing like face painting and bouncy castles, and all the kinds of things that we do to make lives better for the people who live there, make lives better for the staff that works there, and make life better for our investors because they make a lot of money.
Yeah, I think that's important to be so proud of what you're building. Therefore, when you meet with somebody, there's no shame, right? And I think that the more you know yourself, the more you know what to invest in. And you just said it, where it was so important in the beginning, maybe to make money, but you realize that might break your character. And as time goes on, your character is exposed more and more. So if you break it early, you're going to break it later. And it sounds like you didn't do that. It's great. So, uh, is there a book that you read that maybe changed your life, that puts you on this path? I mean, I brought up Rich Dad Poor Dad for a reason
Yeah, you
because
stole it. I mean, what am I going to
that's that.
say,
Is
Mike?
that the one?
I mean, you stole it. Look, there's a lot of great books out there, but something that was pivotal to me was Rich Dad Poor Dad. I mean, I talk about it in my book and how I was trying to make the decision on whether I was going to do real estate full time or not. And I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, or actually,
what year was it? I was
listening.
2006 when I read it.
Okay. This would have been 2015, the end of 2015. I heard about the book in like whenever it came out. My mom,
96, 97.
yeah, my mom was like, "Oh, there's this book I heard about called Rich Dad Poor Dad. You should read it." And I was like, "Yeah." And then when I bought my first apartment, the one up in Washington Heights, I was dating someone, and she was like, "Oh, I'm reading this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. And you shouldn't have bought this. This is a liability." And I'm like, "Screw you." And I broke up with her.
Good.
No, I
No,
didn't break
I'm
up with her
kidding.
because of that, but we did break up. But no, I mean, it was like, she told me that.
Yeah.
I was like offended. I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, everyone's telling me this is a smart move." Like, even my dad, who used to be in real estate and then went into food service, but like everyone's telling me this is such a great thing that I'm doing, and you're sitting here, whatever, Rich Dad Poor Dad. But what happened was, we ended up moving to Miami, and I wanted to do real estate full time, but I didn't have the guts to necessarily do it. And we had just moved down there because my wife had gotten a job opportunity. I'm back in New York, by the way, if anyone's getting confused on like where, but we were in Miami for some time. And so my wife got this job opportunity. We were down there. I was looking for a job in digital marketing, but really wanted to do real estate, but didn't even have like the gumption to even discuss that with my wife. Because I think it was something in my head, but I was like afraid to do it and didn't know if I could do it. And I was listening actually audiobook to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was also listening to the cast album for Hamilton. So the musical Hamilton, which actually invested in, and we were big fans of it, and Hamilton had just come out at the time. And so we're in Miami. I'm listening to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then like on breaks when I need a break, listening to the Hamilton soundtrack. And there's a song in Hamilton where it's where they're saying like, "Don't throw away your shot," right? The song's like, "I'm not going to throw away my shot." And at the end of that, like they're all, everyone's like, take a shot. I'm not going to throw away my shot." And I just got done listening to Kiyosaki, right? And he's like, "Hey, developing these passive streams of income, blah, blah, blah." And like, it dawned on me. I'm like, why am I interviewing at these jobs for like in the advertising world, which I had done for, 18 years at that point, was sick and tired of it and burned out and didn't want to do it. Why was I fighting to try to find a job there when I've got this right here, right in front of my lap? Why don't I just do real estate? And that night I had a conversation with my wife and decided that I was going to do real estate full time.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
the combination of the motivational song combined with the right knowledge, you took your shot. And it sounds like that's why you wrote chapter 6, Taking My Shot, huh?
That is, yes, that is exactly. So I talk about taking the shot in chapter 1. It's a long story anyway, but chapter 6 is about taking that shot and about actually deciding to do it.
And do you think that you had this thought that you would regret it if you didn't? Because I believe when
No.
after I've interviewed many people, there's some type of fear that drives them. We all fear something. Me personally, I feared being on my deathbed and saying I didn't take my shot. So that was what drove me. What drove you?
Yeah, sure. Maybe there's that thought of regret that, why didn't I take my shot? I guess that maybe there was a little bit of that. But when you talk about fear, that's chapter 4, right? That's Matt's Folly, right? And there was that fear. But that fear, between that fear and when I took my shot, there was a long period of time there. And I learned how to get past that fear. So I didn't have any fear. I didn't have necessarily fear of failure. I already had some passive income streams that I had already built.
Got it.
That I didn't necessarily realize I was building passive income streams until Kiyosaki started. I was like, oh, I actually did that. Oh yeah, okay. So I had a little bit of a safety net. My wife had a full-time job that was good, and we had just moved. So we moved into like a really small place because we didn't even know where we wanted to live, and we were keeping our expenses low anyhow. So I was in a safe space where I could try this and see what happened. And if it didn't work out in a year or two, then I could go back to agency life. Like, it wasn't like I was closing the door or burning any bridges there, but I was able to make it a successful business. So it worked out well.
Yeah, I believe that doors will start to open up when you are all in. I don't think anybody wants to deal with a part-time real estate agent, right? They want to see somebody who's committed to their craft, who's all in, who loves what they do. And I think maybe the universe responds to those who actually make that decision and maybe burn the ships,
Yeah, I was just gonna say burn the boats.
Burn the boats.
I opened up I was the MC for the MFIN, as a multifamily investor network conference here in New York City. And I opened it up with a speech talking about burning the boats, right? And how I burned my boats and how sometimes that's the way to do it. If there's no retreat, right? That's the whole story of the burning of the boats, is that there was no way for them to retreat. So they had to advance forward, right? And so sometimes you got to burn the boats.
Yep. And I think that individuals who want to give you their money, they want to see that you have both feet on one side of the line. Otherwise, they're going to say, well, if it fails, he's just going to go back to his advertising job. You have to show the world. You have to prove yourself to the marketplace that you're in this for the long haul.
Well, yeah, and a lot of the first investors on my first couple of deals were ones that were people that I had relationships with, through business or friends and family. And I didn't have a lot of strangers in those deals until I started having a track record. And then people could see the track record, and then people felt more comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You have the book, you're on the podcast, you're on the stages, you're working with big people, you have the nice house, the nice car, people start to believe in you. So you leave the breadcrumbs and your life gets easier. Guys, the book is called Backstage Guide to Real Estate: Produce Passive Income, Write Your Own Story, and Direct Your Dollars Towards Positive Change. Matt Picheny, do I have a website that I could promote to our
that would be great
audience?
It's Picheny.com, Picheny.com. I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes. There's tons of free stuff there. You can buy the book, but there's lots of free information, free videos. You can even go to Picheny.com / and then the number 5, and you can download a 5-step formula that I have. I have this thing called the 5-step formula for multifamily success. So you can get that for free. It's a great resource. So yeah, just go to Picheny.com and check it all out.
Nice. We'll be able to find all your social media handles there.
Yeah, at the bottom of the page, there are links right there,
Yeah.
including the YouTube channel.
Yeah, you're full of personality. I think that's rare in this world. So, guys, look him up. Go to Piccini.com. Easy to find on Google. You're not going to miss this, guys. So, Matt, it's been an honor to talk with you. Thanks so much for giving us your time and insight.
Mike, thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life.